Welcome to Uriah Heep, the Magician's Podcast. I'll be covering every studio song the band has recorded and every bonus track that I can find. Each week we'll go over a new song from the beginning to where they are currently, and as they keep adding albums, I'll keep adding shows. Let the deep dive party begin.
In the magic garden, some were singing, some were dancing.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Uriah Heep, the Magician's Podcast. I am your host, Scott Haskin, and we are working through the songs on the album Return to Fantasy, and there are some gems on this album, let me tell you. Today's song that we are working on is a song called Prima Donna. There are two versions of this. There is the studio version that was released with the album with the bass player of John Wetton. And then we have an alternate, sort of an alternate demo version with the bass player being Gary Thane. And this is a pretty energetic song. It's a pretty short song. And so today's episode is probably going to be a little short, even though we have two versions to go over. And I say that we just jump right into this thing. Here is Prima Donna. Now, you may have noticed the addition of a saxophone. We have not heard any orchestral instruments on this any of these albums since the song Salisbury, and this one is provided by Mel Collins. He was the sax player on this song, very skilled. I'm not very familiar with him just by the name, but I could say that on this song he played very well. So, they didn't just get anybody off the street to play on these things. They got people that were good, and certainly Mel's playing is fantastic, very well blended in with the band. It's an interesting song. It's a rock and roller, but kind of there was that time when there was the sort of transition from, rock and roll heading into a little bit more danceable music that you would hear on a lot of the popular shows that were about to come up, Soul Train, American Bandstand, stuff like that. And this is definitely one that could have been played on either of those shows. I don't know if it was or not, but certainly very danceable track. And I don't dance, and I can tell you that. But it's really interesting hearing them play with the sax. Lee Kerslake is just on fire in this song, and I love the way that the vocals are just kind of peeking through the shadows a little bit. Off to a good start for sure. I dare to say that this song might be a little bit ahead of its time because the songs that I'm thinking of were really more late 70s, early 80s. And here we're really talking mid 70s. So I might venture to say that this was a song that might have been a bit of a pioneer for what was to come in the music industry. Certainly, a powerful track. It just, right from the first notes, your rocket just takes off and you're taking it wherever it goes. Very no holds barred, if you will. A lot going on dynamically, really mainly in the layer of the way that the saxophone plays in. But I love what the keyboards are doing. Nice, energetic drums. Great bass sound on this as well. And, just another great Uriah Heep song. Really powerful stuff. But I have to say, I think the sax is dominating just a little bit too much. When it's starting to bury the vocal a little bit, that's not a good sign. Any instrument should really be behind a vocal track unless there's a specific, part or intention to bury a vocal. Here it's a little too much for me in the mix, but the song just has such great energy. I'm not hearing any guitar at all. And it could be, there's probably some supporting guitar and it's just something that's not cutting through the sax or just, buried a little bit in the mix. But overall, the balance of the audio is pretty good. And I just wish the vocals were a little more out front and the sax was a little more blended in with everything else. I love that little change up with the tempo at the end. Well, I should say that the way the drums are played, because they're basically cut to halftime. The tempo actually stays the same. But I really love that. I love the feel of it. I would have liked a little bit more of that actually before it faded out. Maybe, another 15 or 20 seconds would have been nice. I don't know how long they actually played because all I'm getting, the only version I have has the fade out. So pretty cool though. I love the energy of it. I love the backing vocals are really powerful in this. I still don't hear any guitar. Now, Mick is credited as a writer on this song. That doesn't necessarily mean that there were guitar parts. If there are any, again, it's being buried in the mix. So we might be able to pick those up in the alternate version, which we're going to listen to in just a minute here. And there's some differences in the alternate version that you're going to pick up on right away. And it gives you kind of an insight into what the song would have been like had they not gone with a saxophone player. Okay, it sounds like what we're getting is the guitar is doubling the keyboard. I think that's what I'm hearing. It's a little more apparent in this version than it was in the other, because again, we had the sax was kind of burying things and dominating a little bit of the mix, but I'm pretty sure that's what I'm hearing in this one. But it certainly has, a similar feel to the other version of the song. And again, this would be Gary Thane on bass versus John Wetton, who played on the last version. But I like the groove of it. It's very similar in that light.
I'll go down fighting, but I'd rather be delighting all the people that come to see. The devil's from Chicago, now where the hell do they go when we get in our limousine? Just wanna be where it's all going on. But tell me, what do you do when it's over? And everyone who loved you is gone, yeah.
Isn't it amazing the difference in the mixes here? I mean, granted, we're talking two completely different recordings, might not have even been done in the same place. but certainly at two different time frames. But the mix of it, you've got the vocal is blended in a little bit more because, again, we don't have the sax overpowering it. And the backups in this one so far are much more subtle than they were in the last mix. So, for those of you people who are not audio engineers, have never been in a position where you've seen something mixed, this really shows what you can do with basically the same thing, how many different versions of it you could come up with. And you could have ones where the backup was very much overpowering, slightly overpowering, dead even, slightly underpowering, all kinds of levels of that. And then, you change one drum, it changes the whole dynamics of the song. So mixing is such a vital part of the process of delivering a song that sounds pleasing when it gets to your ears. If everything was over in the left except for the snare drum was the only thing in your right ear, that would be awful. And you would probably not listen to that song, even if you loved the idea of the song. Like, let's say you really loved what the vocal was doing, or you loved the riff, or it was your favorite guitar solo. You're really going to have a hard time listening to it if the mix isn't balanced between both ears, if it doesn't sound, full and doesn't make you lean to one side or the other. But this is a great way for people who aren't in the business or haven't ever mixed anything to kind of get an idea of the difference of what it takes when you have a different type of mix. And there are certain things that you kind of expect if you're going to be delivering it to a final album or a radio playable format versus a demo version, where you're not going to polish every little thing. You're not going to spend hours and hours on the EQ, making sure that, it's perfect. You're going to mix something that sounds good so that you can get it out. And typically that's what, alt versions and things like that are, especially if they're extended versions. But in any case, actually the extended versions are usually based off of the already mixed version. So let me correct myself on that. But it certainly gives you some insight into how it can be different, even if it's the same thing. So as we've gotten used to hearing these demo versions, obviously there's way more reverb on the drums. They're pushed back further in the mix. I think it's a much better balance personally, but the vocals just sound completely different. You can hear there's no high harmony, and they're blended a little bit better together. I think that this mix is fantastic. I think it could have been used for radio play. Certainly something that could have been in a jukebox at the time. If it were a little more modern times, would have been a great song to have at karaoke. It's short, it's fast, it's got a great beat to it, and you could just kind of get in and enjoy it. I don't know how many people would be able to sing it well, but, karaoke, so you get what you get. But yeah, I like it. I like this version. And bass-wise, it's not that far off. I feel that the idea behind it is very similar, that it just comes down to the differences between the way that Gary Thane and John Wetton had, their own style. But either way, I think bass-wise, I think either one's great, perfectly great.
So please
I like that vocal doubling there. That sounds really good. Nice and thick. I like that it's not perfectly on. That adds a little bit of thickness and depth to it if it's not perfectly doubled. But yeah, it sounds good. And I love that this version has really the same energy that the other version does. It's just, obviously different without the sax. But note for note, they hold up against each other, I think, really, really well. Yeah, I like that better. I like having a little bit longer of a section with that cut time part. Sounds a little more adventurous. You could hear kind of the piano and the organ fighting each other a little bit for space, which was nice. Some great stuff from Lee Kerslake. A couple of little bumps in there that I heard, but, it's a demo version, so that's quite okay. But overall, yeah, great energy, just as good as the first one. Personally, I actually like it better without the sax. It's a neat idea. But it's always a little bit weird to me when you have, up to this point, this is the only song that's had like one little orchestral instrument. So to me, it throws things off a little bit. When you had Salisbury, that's such an epic piece. I mean, it's basically half of an album. So, to have an orchestral section in that kind of makes sense because it's a much bigger epic piece. When you have a song that has something that's kind of really out of the norm, it always feels a little bit off to me until I get used to it. And I'm not sure personally that I've ever gotten used to it. It's certainly well played. I'm not saying it's not. The quality of the performance is fantastic, but does it fit in the song? And that's really something only the listener can decide if it works for them or not. For me, I actually like this version better. I like that it doesn't have it. I like that there's a longer cut time sequence at the end, but I love that the energy is just the same. I would say a blend of the two would be maybe a little bit more of the backing vocals and maybe one, of the higher harmonies would be nice to just kind of round it out a little bit. But either way, I mean, between the two, we get what I'm talking about. And I'm really glad that they included this as a bonus track because it's really nice to hear a cleaner version of it. And as I say cleaner, I don't mean the mix. I mean, just like with just the regular band that you can hear what everyone was doing. Guitars are still a little bit buried. I'd like a little bit more of those again, but it's mixed the way it's mixed. So it's an enjoyable song, very much so. It's over quick. That's the thing. It just feels like it goes by so fast, although the bonus track was almost a minute longer than the original. That happens a lot in demos. You're just kind of, you take time to experiment and try different things and see what works and what doesn't. And then when you go to do the final recording, you've already got all that out of your system. You pretty much know what you want to do. And sometimes you throw in a little varieties, sometimes a little spontaneity, but you basically have that, the demo time to work out a lot of those ideas so that it's easy to just go in and do the final recording. But in any case, great song. I liked both versions. And that's it for Prima Donna, guys. I hope that you enjoyed my little walkthrough of these versions of the song. It's a fantastic song. It's a little bit different from what we've heard so far on this album. This probably would have fit really well on Wonderworld, I want to say, which was a little bit more eclectic from song to song, but a good song nonetheless. And I'm really glad that they put it out and that I got to listen to it, and I have the ability to do so whenever I choose, because that's how it works. So I hope that you guys have a great rest of your day. We will see you tomorrow to round out the end of your week with another song from Return to Fantasy. Cheers! Thank you for joining me on this episode of Uriah Heep, the Magician's Podcast. If you have enjoyed this show, please consider going over to Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast outlet, leaving a rating or a review. Be sure to subscribe to make sure that you are notified when new episodes are available. Please be sure to share this podcast with your fellow Uriah Heep enthusiasts and anyone who you think would like Uriah Heep, which should be everyone. And if you are so inclined, please feel free to contribute to the Patreon account. And if you are not a Patreon subscriber, you can also pay through the PayPal link on the website listed in the show links below. I would also like to thank Uriah Heep for their very generous support of the show, and thank you guys for listening. We'll see you in the next episode. Happy days!